Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mark Hernandez. I am a program coordinator with the Los Angeles County Office of Education, LACO, specifically the Tobacco Use Prevention Education Unit. We welcome you all to today's 2-hour training. Today's training is on, or we titled it, Red Ribbon Week. Beyond Red Ribbon Week, engaging with youth to promote health advocacy. And if that sounds correct, you're in the right spot. We're going to get into some agenda, into some expectations, but I'm going to introduce my wonderful colleagues who are with us today. Derek Reed, our senior program specialist. We have Elizabeth Kites, our secretary, and we have Linnell Lujan, another senior program specialist, who's actually leading today's training. And as you notice, today is recorded, but we'll be sharing a little more about that in a minute. Hand it over to Linnell.
All right, thank you, Mark. So welcome everyone. Thank you for being here today for this 2-hour training. Thank you for joining us. So let's get started. You have already introduced yourself in the chat today. If you have not, go ahead and take the time to do that. As Mark said, I'm Linnell Lujan. I'm a senior program specialist here at LACO's TUPE unit. I oversee the DOJ grant. And a little bit about myself. About 6 months prior to this, I was a secondary history teacher. So a lot of my lens and some of the stories I'm going to share with you today are going to come from those experiences. A little housekeeping for us today, as mentioned earlier. This training is going to be recorded. And so the recording will be available to you after the presentation. We will also have it available on our Canvas resource page, which I will talk a little bit about later on in the presentation. Please feel free to use the chat box for any questions, any sort of comments that you might have. I may not be able to see it as I'm presenting, but someone from our LACO TUPE team will be able to help you and answer your questions. Today, our training is going to involve some breakouts, and so we ask that you please participate by having your cameras on, if that is possible, in the workspace that you are currently at, and engaging in some of these discussions to help out yourself and help out your partners in your breakout rooms with the different activities that we have today. If you are new to some of our trainings, a little bit about the Tobacco Use Prevention Education Unit, or the TUPE unit here at LACO. We are dedicated to supporting schools and law enforcement with educational training materials and collaborations. We really like to focus on building capacity, providing professional trainings like the one today, and facilitate successful collaboration in the work that we do. Of course, again, we have our program coordinator, Mark Hernandez, myself, senior program specialist, and Derek, another senior program specialist within our unit, as well as Elizabeth Kites, our unit secretary. So let's get into what we're going to be covering today. Our agenda, I'm going to start off in an obvious place, right? A little bit about the Red Ribbon campaign, but then we're going to move beyond that, right? Kind of in our title. We're going to talk a little bit about the 4 W's, the why, the where, the what, and the when, which I'll go over in just a second. Share out some youth organization resources that you can use within the work that you are doing at your organization or at your site. Some resources and upcoming trainings that are offered through our unit and our department. And then we will close out with a survey and some contact information if you ever need our support or have any questions for us. So here's going to be sort of the meat and potatoes of our presentation today. We're going to cover 4 W's, the why, the where, the what, and the when. And in this part, we're going to talk about why it's important to engage youth in civic engagement, youth advocacy, youth development. I will refer to all of those different types of titles, but they're all pretty much the same thing, right? Youth advocacy, civic engagement, youth development, it's all the same thing. I will interchange those often throughout today's 2-hour training. We're going to talk a little bit about skills that students will develop by engaging in these groups, and some of the benefits that students will encounter by being a part of these programs. Then we're going to move on to the where. Where do we start? Where do we find students? How do we select students, or how do we recruit students? Even where do we find the adults who might be in charge of facilitating or running these programs? And basically just where do we start this entire process? Some of you may already be in the middle of that process, and some of you may be looking to just start fresh and new. Then we'll move on to the what. What sort of events or activities can we engage in to make it interesting for you, to make them engaged, to get them involved? What are possible activities to try out that you may not have been doing at your sites already? And then we'll talk a little bit about how we can approach that. So planning civic action activities, how we plan each one of those in a very thoughtful and meaningful way. And then finally, our when. When can we promote health promotion or tobacco-free events beyond Red Ribbon Week? What are some other times in our school schedule or in our calendar that we can really do this work and have students sort of be engaged and empowered to keep doing this work beyond the month of October? So once again, let's start in an obvious place. I'm going to start off with my own personal experience and knowledge of Red Ribbon Week. I realize that this is not going to be everybody's experience. It probably won't be most people's experience because my experience is a little weird, right? It comes in two different places. One, from a student standpoint, right? My first encounter with Red Ribbon Week was as a student, quite literally from kindergarten to 12th grade. Then once I became a teacher, more recently in the last 4 years, I was a PBIS coach at my small high school in the El Rancho Unified School District. And under my hat of being a PBIS coach, I was also in charge of the Red Ribbon Week activities for my site. And it's a little embarrassing, maybe, to say that my knowledge of Red Ribbon Week was very limited. I knew Red Ribbon Week as a student. I knew it meant being drug-free, saying no to drugs. I knew that it meant a lot of activities and a lot of promotion, and that is pretty much where my knowledge stopped. When I became a PBIS coach and on my campus, that was one of maybe 7 hats that I wore on my campus. And so I was really tasked with make sure your classes are participating in the door decoration for the district. Make sure that your students are getting the red ribbon swag that the district bought us. And I followed each one of those steps as I was told. However, I really lacked the knowledge of what Red Ribbon Week really was about, where it came from, and what the history of it was. And so in the work that I do now here at LACO in the TUPE unit, this really brought my attention to our students, right? Do our students really know what Red Ribbon Week is? And if they don't, why don't they? And are they really going through the motions? Or is this work even meaningful with them? Or is it impactful for them if we're just telling them, hey, you're gonna decorate a poster for Red Ribbon Week, it's no drugs, and ready, set, go do it, right? And so here is a quick little video kind of addressing that issue of, do students really know where this is coming from?
We asked middle and high school students what they think about when they hear the words Red Ribbon Week.
Staying away from drugs.
Red ribbons displayed all over school.
Making healthy choices for our future.
That is true now, but do you know the history of Red Ribbon? In 1985, a DEA agent named Kiki Camarena was kidnapped tortured and killed in Mexico, working to prevent drug dealers from bringing drugs into the United States. After his funeral, his friends and family began wearing red ribbons as a way of showing their love of Kiki and their respect for his hard work to keep kids safe, healthy, and drug-free. That led to Red Ribbon Campaign celebrations across the country and eventually a National Red Ribbon Week in 1988. Red Ribbon Week should be educational and fun, but we can't forget to take a moment to honor the memory of DEA agent Kiki Camarena and his family.
Thank you, Agent Camarena.
We appreciate you, Camarena family.
Thanks for your sacrifice, Kiki Camarena.
So that video was taken directly from the redribbon.org website. And again, this may not be your experience, but my personal experience was I had no idea the history of Red Ribbon Week, which was a little weird since I was a history teacher. And so really that importance of involving our students in sort of the story and the intent behind Red Ribbon Week goes beyond just contests or poster decorations. And that's sort of what we're going to be covering today.
We asked
Speaking of the Red Ribbon website, that was another thing that I did not have a lot of experience with, especially as, again, a PBIS coach at my former position. And there are a lot of resources on their website that can be useful, some of which are the Red Ribbon Week downloads, which is a complete guide and a complete download of different activities that you can use, posters with this year's theme. There are Red Ribbon virtual activities, and there's even something called Red Ribbon Fridays, where you can share different types of activities that you have done on your campus, at your school, in your community, and they can be showcased. So let's start off with our first W, the why. Robert F. Kennedy said, "Few will have the greatness to bend history itself, but each of us can work to change small portion of events, and in the total of all of those acts will be written the history of this generation." And while, of course, the generation he was talking about was not necessarily the generation today, it still is an important quote, because our students really are the future generation, right? They will grow up to be citizens and adults, and we want to be able to prepare them for that. So what is advocacy, right? In terms of for our students, an advocate is a person who argues for a cause, a supporter, or a defender. To advocate is to act in support of a particular issue or a cause. And it's essentially, advocacy is the process of standing up for what you believe in and influencing others to change the way they think and act about an issue. And that word influence is a really, really potent word today, right? We hear it a lot. Instagram influencers, TikTok influencers, right? And so really, if we're guiding our students to stand up for what they believe in and influencing others in positive, helpful ways, we can really help students be a change for good, right? To advocate for things that, that they really believe in and that can help them and their peers. Keeping youth at the center and giving them the ability and the opportunity to be meaningful and equitably engaged in these programs, policies, and systems that affect their lives. And as we know with social media, again, TikTok, Instagram, Snapchat, our youth are very, very concerned and involved with the things that affect their lives, right? The things that affect their peers, their communities, their everyday lives, especially with our youth who have encountered the pandemic, right? And that social aspect of connecting with other people and connecting with each other. If we are trying to put them at the center and really guide them into affecting positive change with their communities, this is where we're going to help them within our youth development programs. When we're talking more specific in the work that we do, right? The tobacco prevention, vape prevention, these project-based learnings, projects that provide students with the knowledge and skills to live tobacco, vape, and marijuana free. And that's what we're specifically talking about today, youth development with this lens or with this focus. So some of the great benefits of involving young people in tobacco control movement are their excitement, their energy, their eagerness. Once youth have been educated about the harmful effects of tobacco and e-cigarette use, and how the tobacco industry is manipulating them through flavored vapes, flavored e-juices, they start to become aware of the effects that vaping and tobacco use have on them, their loved ones, and their peers. And once they are educated in those types of things, they are usually eager to join the efforts against tobacco use. Youth bring a new vitality to this picture. Teens are usually willing to advocate against this because of many reasons. They might have family members and or friends who have become ill or have died from smoking. They themselves may have been victims of diseases caused by secondhand smoke or even firsthand smoking. They are aware that the tobacco industry is trying to hook them. Kids don't like to be manipulated. And when they realize that they have been manipulated by tobacco industries, advertising, even social media, this is something that angers them. And they want to do everything they can not to be manipulated. They know that they are being targeted and they just hate the smell, or maybe they hate the effects that smoking has had on somebody that they know. For whatever the reason is, one thing is clear. Youth are willing to fully embrace the cause, stand up for their beliefs, and try to make a difference in people's lives. Teens are willing to rise up against social injustice and right the things that have been wrong. For those reasons, youth should be involved and should not be overlooked as a valuable component of public health movements. So in this moment, students can learn very valuable skills. Once they start to advocate and be a part of these movements, there are lots of skills and lots of benefits that students can encounter and learn from by being involved in this type of work. But definitely some of the major ones are empowerment, right? Students taking ownership or feeling empowered to make these changes or to be trusted to make decisions and changes. Awareness, naturally a part of this type of work is for students to be aware of the topic. Again, specifically for the work that we do, aware about the dangers of tobacco, vaping, and marijuana use, aware of how it impacts them, aware of how they can make changes. It also promotes social emotional growth. It helps teens understand how their actions can have an impact, both negative and positive. It also helps them with relationship building and collaboration. They can work not only with one another, but how they work with and engage with adults, right? Who might be facilitating these programs, their teachers, their community members, their admin. It allows them to take ownership, to feel like what they are doing is important. And of course, for some of us, maybe teachers or admin, it also promotes Common Core and social emotional learning, or SEL, strategies and framework. So we can always fit this into our core classes, maybe our homeroom classes, maybe our elective classes, because it really does support some of those communication skills that are in Common Core and even the social emotional learning aspect. Now, one thing that we really need to keep in mind is the ladder of youth participation. And if you're not familiar with the ladder of youth participation, don't worry, we're gonna go over this. When it comes to participation, this is Roger Hart's ladder of children's participation, which describes 8 ascending levels of decision-making agency, control, and power that can be given to children and youth by adults, by us. Of course, the bottom 3 are non-participation levels. It isn't until you get to 4 through 8 where students are actually are at different degrees of participation. And just to explain a little bit about what these mean, manipulation is when youth doesn't understand the issues, right? They don't know what's motivating their participation. They don't know what role they play in it. Sometimes adults feel that the ends justify the means. And if children have no understanding of this issue or the topic, then they don't understand their actions. They don't understand the importance. And this is where the manipulation part comes in. A great example of this would be maybe preschool children carrying around political placards concerning the impacts of social policies on children, when those children don't actually understand the issue or the role that they play in political processes. Decoration is our next step, when children and youth are put on public display during an event, but they do not understand the meaning or the intent of their involvement. So a great example of this would be when children are given t-shirts related to a cause, and maybe they're asked to sing and or dance at an event, or maybe a carnival, a school carnival, or a community event, and they have little idea of what it's all about. And they don't even understand why they're there. All they know is that they were told to, again, maybe wear a shirt, dress up, sing a song. And this is the part of decoration. It's being put on display. Tokenism is when children are apparently given a voice, but in fact have little or no choice about the subject or the style of communicating it. They have little or no opportunity to formulate their own opinions. A great example of this would be conference panels. Students are handpicked. Students are given what to say, but they did not volunteer. They were not really educated on the topic. All they were told was to maybe read a speech or to formulate something. And this is what we refer to as tokenism. Then you start to get into the actual degrees of participation. Assigned but informed is when youth understands the intent. That's number one. Number two, that they know how the decisions were made and they were involved in those decisions and why those decisions were made. Number three, they have meaningful roles. And number four, they actually volunteered for the project. They willingly volunteered for the project after it was made clear to them, the first three, right? How decisions were made and why they were making them. A great example of this would be a World Summit for Children that's held at the United Nations headquarters. However, this is difficult. This would be difficult to include young people because genuinely, this would be very complex. The scale would be too big for planning. It would be a logistical nightmare for children to do on their own. So it's mostly facilitated by adults. However, youth have a bigger role to play in it. Next, consulted and informed is when children act as consultants for adults in a matter which has great integrity. The project is designed and run by adults, but children understand the process and their opinions are treated seriously. This can be, an example of this would be adult-led survey of youth perceptions. Next would be adult initiated and shared. This is when adults initiate participatory projects, but they share the decision-making authority or management with children. A great example of this would be a youth newspaper, where adults are initiating the participation, but it's the students who are actually doing the decision-making and the management. Youth initiated and directed are when children and youth conceptualize and carry out the complex projects by working cooperatively in small or large groups. Adults may observe and assist children, but they do not interfere with the process or play a directive or managerial role. This is very, very hard to put an example to, because adults are usually not good at responding to young people's own initiative. It's really hard for adults not to play a directing role, because again, with my experience as a teacher, that's sort of what we do, right? We're in front of a class, we make sure that students are safe, we give them the assignments, we grade. And so this is really, really hard to do, but it's not impossible. And then finally, you have youth-initiated shared decisions with adults. This is when children, though primarily teenage youth in this case, because they are older, they share the decision-making authority, management, or power with an adult partner and ally. A great example of this would be students partnering with adults to raise funds, or develop and run a school program or lead a community campaign. It's really important to remember that while you want to stay away from those first 3 steps, we're not really going to be able to get to the 8th step, within a month, within 3 months, 6 months, maybe even a school year, right? This is something that's built upon in a program over time, with students who have experience in some of those lower levels of degrees of participation and work up towards them. So that's going to bring us to our where. Where do we start? We know the importance, we know the different degrees of participation. Where do we start? Some of you might have already started a program and you've been doing it for years. Some of you may have inherited a program that's already started and needs a renewed effort. And some of you might be starting from the very, very beginning. In this next section, we're going to cover where to begin, how to add new strategies to what you already are doing, and how to strengthen your existing programs. To start, we're going to have the 2P coordinator from the Pomona Unified School District, which I know some of our attendees today are from this school district. This coordinator is going to talk a little bit about how they recruit students for their 2P program, which is their tobacco-free youth program, and how they found students to participate from various different schools within their district.
These projects. So some of the school sites have done it a little differently, where sometimes the advisors are the AVID teachers. And so what they'll do is they'll use their AVID group for their 2P group. Some of the schools have used their ASB because the ASB advisors are the ones who have volunteered to be the 2P advisor for the school site. So this way our schools aren't working so hard, our teachers aren't working so hard, because we just want to make it work smarter. And then we have a really strong peer counseling groups in our district. So it's the peer counselors, and within their curriculum, they've implemented peer education. So they do their lessons on ATOD education, and the peer counselors then do peer education, and they go into other classrooms and teach their peers on that. So we usually get a lot of projects out of the school sites where they are an existing group. The ones that don't have a block, sometimes it's because the advisors aren't an advisor for anything else. And so they've selected to just create a 2P after school club or lunch club or something like that, so that they have one at their site. Now that was pre-COVID.
So as you can see, the 2P coordinator from the school district used a variety of different ways to institute their 2P programs within their school district. They decided not to completely reinvent the wheel, and they started to do their 2P work out of their existing programs, ASB, schools that had AVID, and schools that had peer counseling. However, there were some schools that did not have all 3 of those or any of those, or the coordinator or facilitator was not in charge of any of those programs. And so for those schools, they basically recruited and started fresh by creating their own 2P after school programs. And so you can kind of see how this district did it from varying different levels. So some tips on how to start Number one is prepare for the partnership before engaging youth. The worst thing we can do is be unprepared. We want to honor our young people's time and their busy schedule. So we really need to prepare before even taking on a task like this. First, we want to look at our priority populations. Based on your goals, what groups are you trying to reach? Is it a certain age level? Are you looking for students who have a certain academic requirement? Is it a cultural background? Is it geographically? Maybe you're working for a nonprofit organization or for a city's parks and rec. And maybe you're looking for a certain type of student who is just within your region, right? So make sure to identify the groups that you're trying to reach in order to focus those recruitment efforts. This is going to help ensure that the work will feel like a good fit for them and for you. The process and the steps of selection process, think about what that is going to look like. Are you going to conduct interviews? Will you require letters of recommendations, applications? Whichever you decide, also make sure to keep in mind to make it easy and attainable for youth to engage. Ensure you're attracting a wide range of students from different experiences and different lenses, but you want to make sure that even youth who don't usually volunteer might be interested and might be able to participate. When it comes to recruitment, your recruitment should cover a diverse range of methods. The goal is to bring in a diverse group of youth, again, with different perspectives and different lenses. Initially, the thought is to recruit or reach out to existing programs that do similar work to what yours does. And while that's a great idea, you also want to keep in mind that you want a diverse group of students. So also reaching out to students who aren't usually motivated to participate in extracurricular activities. Keep in mind that you can advertise these things through flyers at local hangouts for students, social media, maybe morning announcements at your schools. You can get the attention of students again through social media if you work for an organization, again, like a Parks and Recs organization. But you want to get the attention of students who don't usually volunteer as well. Next, you want to be able to communicate clearly the roles and the expectations that youth play in this process. You want to make sure that they clearly understand before and during the engagement what their role is and what their expectations are. It's important for us to articulate what to expect and those roles, because youth input is important, and we need to be able to create space for group agreements and expectations. If you take a look at your Padlet, there is a resource from the Act for Youth organization titled Preparing for Youth Engagement, Youth Voice, Youth Adult Participation, and Youth Organizing that focuses on different youth engagement practices. And there's also a checklist there that you can use throughout your process when creating or setting up to engage in a youth program or a youth advocacy group. Number two, we also need to keep in mind to share power with young people. This is probably one of the most important parts. One, because again, us as adults are not necessarily used to that, but also this is what's really going to empower students to be involved and to really have interest in the work that we're doing. It's important for young people to learn how to share power from adults in their lives. We should not elicit input with youth without empowering them to be decision makers. We need to be able to trust them to lead from the start. This is sort of like a bottom-up involvement. We need to be able to allow them to be part of the planning and the implementation process. This creates opportunities for them to make decisions and to take action. Another important part of this is structured roles. These roles should be structured with substance. Again, referring back to our Heart's Ladder, we want students to be involved. We don't just want to give them a role or tell them what to read or tell them what to say. We want them to have roles that are important, that have substance, that are meaningful. Young people should be engaged and play an integral role to these projects. Finally, we need to remember to resist the urge to edit youth work. Our role is to listen to young people and to urge students to be empowered. Our role is to listen to them and to help them and support them and guide their efforts. It's important for them to see themselves in their work. Once again, referring to our Padlet, there is a power shifting checklist there as well from Restless Development. This is a checklist to ensure that young people that you work with or on behalf of have the power to lead. So make sure to check that out as well. Another part is, how are you going to recruit? We spoke a little bit about that earlier of what sort of parameters will be involved. Maybe you do have a recruitment letter. An example from Peer Advocates in Action, which was developed by Hillary Roberts, has some great information and great templates like this one. This is a recruitment letter that can be used when recruiting youth for advocacy programs. Hillary Roberts, she offers training workshops on how to do this. It's really a training on how to start. So how to recruit, how to select students, what to think about when selecting and recruiting. Some of the aspects talked about so far in this presentation were taken from her book and from her training. So if you are interested in any of her workshops, once again, you will be getting the PowerPoint slides in a PDF version later. And this is her information and website if this sounds like something you might be interested in. But that brings us to the how. How do we do all of this work? How do we do this from beginning, middle, and end? And unfortunately, our how doesn't fit into our 4 W's. However, in addition to Hillary Roberts' training, there is also another training that comes out of the History and Social Science Department here at LACO. And this is an in-depth 3-day training opportunity that teaches the tools and strategies to build civic knowledge, skills, and dispositions for all students to become informed and engaged citizens. Now, I know that that seems a little odd. This is coming from the History and Social Science Department. When we think of civic engagement, we think of civics, government. And while that is true in a sense of that's just where it naturally fits, civic engagement is actually, can be applied to everything and anything. Science, English, math, and in this case, health promotion and tobacco-free promotion as well. Michelle Herzog is the coordinator who conducts these trainings. And she actually has one coming up where it's a 3-day training. But just to give you a little bit of an idea of how this fits into the work that we do, Michelle here is going to talk a little bit about how this training includes civic engagement, how it fits into the TUPE work that we normally do.
So yeah, I'm really happy to be here and look forward to working with you today and tomorrow, and the opportunity to really kick your work up to the next level. I know you're all very interested in your work and tobacco use prevention with helping young people understand the risks around marijuana use, smoking, vaping, all the great work. I'm familiar with what Mark does, and I know you do similar work here. And I was asked to be part of your work today because we know that your work is dedicated to educating kids about these issues, but what can we do to equip young people to take it to the next level, to take on policy initiatives that would really have long-term effects on ending these use of these substances in a big way. So it's one thing for them to stop using them and maybe educate peers around them, but what can they do to really impact the system as a whole? And that's where civics comes into play. So that's why we've been working together. I've done a few presentations for him last year and glad to be doing it this year too. Because my primary role, I'm the history social studies coordinator at LACO. So yes, I work in the same office as Mark, but my work is really primarily devoted to supporting social studies teachers. But in the realm of civics, we're really moving beyond the boundaries. That civics is not just a social studies thing. That seems like the logical place to put it, because kids are learning about democracy and government and history and all that good stuff. But if we want kids to be civically engaged and impact the world around them, it has to go beyond their social studies. So we're using civics in science class, in health classes, in math classes, in English classes. Last week I did a 3-day training for ROP teachers, because they're really interested in getting kids onto career pathways and finding ways for them to bump that up to the next level so they can really impact this.
All right, so that is just a little insight on the work that Michelle Herzog has done with our unit and how we've really incorporated youth civic engagement and advocacy in the TUPE work that we do. The sound you just heard was from a training that she offered to our unit a couple of years ago. However, she does have she does have a training coming up in October if this is something you might be interested in. If you take a look at the Padlet that we showed you earlier, you have access to this, this flyer as well as the registration link. It is a 3-day training where she basically goes over everything she just kind of talked about in terms of helping adults be able to build civic learning programs and civic engagement programs for the youth that we work with or on behalf of. All right, so that brings us to our what. Once we figure out where to start and how to proceed, and you have your program up and running, or maybe you already have your program up and running, what sort of activities, and let's kind of continue some of the Red Ribbon Week ideas, or just ideas that we can use beyond Red Ribbon Week. This one, again, some of these examples are going to come out of Pomona Unified School District. This one was a cooling off during the holidays and how to find healthy hobbies. So what they did was they set up different stations for healthy hobbies. And this one was crafting. So possibly using crafts or crafting as a healthy hobby during the holidays when students are home for maybe 2 or 3 weeks. Again, thinking about vaping issues and the work that we do. Sometimes students kind of revert to vaping or the use of tobacco or just using substances in a way to cope, especially during the pandemic. And that's kind of where we're seeing some of those statistic numbers go up. And so trying to promote healthy hobbies or healthier ideas. This one has a special place in my heart because I personally, when I'm not at LACO doing my TUPE work, I am a crafter. I sew, I create things. And so this is something that I would totally be interested in doing, both as an adult and a student. Another example is our tug of war against tobacco games. Obviously, tug of war is not something that was invented for this, but just kind of rebranding it as a war against tobacco. And of course, students have fun. In that top picture, you have adult versus students. So you've got maybe your principal, your deans, your counselors, and again, involving the adults on campus. Maybe it is the school safety people or aides, or again, their favorite teacher. Being involved in some of these games and activities with them is really impactful. Another idea that I would never have thought of is a piñata contest. So here we have different examples of piñatas that are promoting tobacco-free or substance-free healthy choices. This I can totally see students getting really excited about and kind of displaying their piñatas throughout the campus. Again, this is not something that I would have ever thought of without this example. And you can definitely see how these activities and these events are kind of like a fresh new look on some of the activities that we're commonly seeing or used to. Another really popular one nowadays are PSA contests. This one comes out of Alhambra Unified School District. They have an entire Google website dedicated to their tobacco or 2B group. And you can see down there at the bottom the source for that site. So if you're ever interested in seeing examples of some of their PSA contests, there are videos there that are student created for some of the events that they do. These are just thumbnails, gives you a little bit of an idea of how students create these. Some are animated, some are stop motion. You can see the top right-hand one is more, they took drawings and they recorded it. But using technology and sort of using the storytelling part is really interesting for students to engage in. Another resource that you have access to in your Padlet is out of Orange County's Department of Education. They have a website there that is dedicated to Red Ribbon Week. It is an entire toolkit. And while it is branded as a Red Ribbon Week toolkit, remember that we can use a lot of these activities and a lot of these strategies beyond Red Ribbon Week. More specifically on this site, it's actually a Canvas course. They do have this PDF printout of, I believe it's made up of 6 pages of different activities that you can use with students. Some of these activities include podcasts, PSA contests, social media blitz campaigns, meme challenges, and other activities that, once again, you maybe haven't thought of or might be brand new and engaging. You can even think about maybe TikTok videos, right, in the form of Flipgrids, anything to get students excited and engaged in. This resource is really, really cool because they are organized by grade level. So they can either state that it is best with middle school and high school or both. But a lot of these activities range anywhere from elementary to high school. It also tells you the type of activity that it is, whether it can be done in person and or virtually. And another great caveat to this resource is there is a small section at the end that includes activities for families. Remember that Red Ribbon Week, health promotion, anti-tobacco is not just a school thing. It can be a community thing. It could be something that families also advocate for and promote at home, at your local parks, in your local boys and girls clubs. All of these things can be used in a very variety of different ways outside of the school campus. So next, we're going to talk about a resource that comes out of the civic engagement training that we spoke about earlier, coming out of our history and social science department here at LACO. These are some documents that come out of that 3-day training, and we're going to talk about just 2 of them: the Civic Action Planner and the Civic Action Cards. Again, when we are engaging or facilitating these youth advocacy groups or civic engagement groups, we really have to be thoughtful and make sure that each one of our actions and our steps are meaningful. So in this, we have our civic action card and planners. First, let's look at our planner. When it comes to planning with students, what kind of action or problem solving is going to take place? We want to talk about what the topic of the study is. Our example for today's purposes might be smoking in public spaces. Maybe you are at a school or an organization that is in a city where there are no smoking ordinances or policies. And maybe that's what the problem is, right? What is this problem and how are we going to address it? Knowing that the problem is that the city has no smoking policies or ordinances, we need to really come up with a civic inquiry question. For those of us who may have been teachers or former teachers, again, speaking on my own personal experience, this might be your essential question, right? How can we come up with a civic inquiry question that is really going to ask the question and answer it in order for you to find solutions and take informed action? This question is really going to guide what that action is going to be. For our purposes, that question might be, how can we raise awareness of the dangers of secondhand smoke, right? Secondhand smoke can happen in public spaces like in parks, shopping centers, parking lots, hiking trails, right? And so once that is addressed, or once that is formed, then that is the point where you take the informed action. And what is the informed action going to be? Is it going to be appropriate? Let's say the students decide a Twitter campaign. Twitter's fun, they like Twitter, but engaging students in conversations of, maybe that's a great idea, but let's talk about that. Is that going to solve our problem? Is it age appropriate for our students? Maybe you're working with elementary age students, and maybe them being on Twitter and on social media is not going to be appropriate for them. So that really begs the question, what civic or what informed action is going to best fit the topic or the question? And is it appropriate for our students, whether that be their age level or maybe their intent, right? For this specific example, we might want to consider contacting an elected official rather than a Twitter campaign, right? If we are trying to enact change and get students to really be involved in the process of changing things within their community, a Twitter campaign might not be as effective as, say, contacting elected officials. We also want to keep in mind the ladder of youth participation, right? Again, a Twitter campaign might not be appropriate for elementary school students, maybe middle school students, but how much of participation are they going to need? How much structured help are they going to need? Maybe something like that might be more appropriate for older ages, but keeping in mind the degrees of participation. What is really going to help your students get as far up that ladder as you can? That's going to bring us to our last W, the when. When can we do these activities? When can we promote tobacco prevention and health promotion that goes beyond Red Ribbon Week? Yes, Red Ribbon Week is one of the big ones, but where can we fit them into other dates? So let's talk about some of these other possible dates. One thing to remember is, don't forget your school district's or your school's calendar. When I was teaching at the high school level, we had two different calendars. We had our district calendar where all the schools celebrated obvious things like Red Ribbon Week. But then our school had our own calendar. For instance, our school within our district was the only school that threw a huge Day of the Dead event. It was after school and it was open to community, people who had students at our school, even people who didn't have students at our school. It was a community and neighborhood celebration. And so make sure to keep in mind some of those dates within your school and your district's calendar where you can naturally fit in some of these events and some of these civic action programs where you can put on display some of the work that you do. Again, for us, that would be our TUPE work. Also keep in mind other dates like parent-teacher conferences or back to school night, when sometimes at the secondary level and even at the middle school level, there might be student booths outside that are promoting clubs or other groups that are on that campus. Another great resource is one that you see here on the screen. It comes out of Kick It California, and it's their social media calendar. Yes, this is an old version because it says 2021, 2022. I am hoping that they come out with their updated one soon, but as an example, this is their social media calendar, which is linked down at the bottom. So once again, when you get these PDF slides, you'll be able to access them. This is an entire calendar of some of their suggestions of times to promote these healthy promotions or substance use prevention. You have things like Native American Heritage Month. So keep in mind that we're not just looking for health promotion, we're looking for cultural, we're looking for lots of different places that we can do this work. Women's History Month in March, maybe American Heart Month in February. Then you have some where they have specific days. March 10th is No Smoking Day. And so this calendar provides a lot of different options that you can use in some of the work that you do, whether that is a national day, a week, or an entire month. For instance, not only is Red Ribbon Week in October, but it's also Breast Cancer Awareness Month. This website also has a Google Calendar that you can add to your own calendar. So if this image, the Kick It California social media calendar, is not really working for you, they have a Google Calendar that they have already built out that you can add to your own personal calendar. And it has a lot of the same information. They have National Grandparents' Day, again, Breast Awareness Month. So these are some places that you can also look to besides the two websites that I provided for you. Some examples of what I sort of built out are here is kind of a brief overview of a year's worth, right? You have October's Red Ribbon Week, but you also have Lung Health Day in that same month. You have some of the obvious ones: Great American Smokeout, Weedless Wednesdays in January, National No Smoke Day. But once again, we can go beyond some of those kind of hitting it on the head or hitting on the nail moments, right? For instance, December is Suicide Prevention Week. While this isn't necessarily substance prevention advocacy or promotion, it definitely is mental health. It definitely addresses something that students go through during those December months, especially when they're away from their friends and some of the adults in their lives for 2 to 3 weeks during the winter holiday. Another one would be February. February is when we have Valentine's Day. So maybe thinking up of your own possible dates. For instance, Healthy Relationship Month to coincide with Valentine's Day, or even Kindness Day to coincide with Valentine's Day. So we can go beyond some of the medical and health parts and really look at some cultural, mental health, or even ones that kind of coincide with some of the holidays that are already occurring on our calendar. Hopefully you were able to build out your own calendar. I apologize for the Google Doc not being accessible at first. Hopefully I was able to change that quick enough for you to be able to access your own. I hope you were able to come up with your own calendar for the entire year. Maybe this is something that you can try out this year or plan for the next school year in the coming time when you are creating your advocacy group. So that's going to bring us to winding down our training today. We have some youth organization resources and some groups that are already doing work with young people. This slide will be completely hyperlinked for you. Here are some groups that we sort of suggest looking into when it comes to working with youth advocacy groups. Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids has a lot of great resources and activities available for you and your youth initiative group. Youth Leadership Institute is also another great resource that you can use and find more information on how to engage youth in leadership roles. California Youth Advocacy Network is another great one. They have an entire guidebook on how to engage youth in advocacy groups, how to build it from the ground up. Some of the points that were talked about today were taken from that guide. So that's definitely something worth looking at. And Friday Night Live might be something that you have at your school district, or if you don't, it might be something that you are interested in. Friday Night Live is a student group. We have a chapter or a unit that works out of LACO. So if you are interested, take a look at that website, some of the work that they do. They actually have a youth conference coming up in a couple of months. So there's some great information for you to look at there as well. Some of the resources that come out of our office and our unit have all been compiled and placed on a Canvas course. While it is on a Canvas course, it is not a course, it is an open resource page for you to take from. The only thing that we do ask is that you do register. That just helps us keep track as to how much our resources are being used and what kind of resources are being used more than others. We do ask that you sign up with your full email address as your username. Once you sign up that one time, you have access to various resources. One is past presentations and trainings that we have conducted. For instance, this training will be on our resource page once we have it cleaned up and edited. We also offer other resources in the form of pamphlets, posters, fact cards, and other literature that you might use or need at your school district or organization. These all come free from our district. Today, you will get the opportunity to get a sampling in a care package once you complete our survey. And if for some reason you need more of these, you can always contact our office and request certain ones. Maybe you have a parent conference coming up or a parent presentation and you want to pass out some tobacco fact pamphlets. We will be more than happy to help and support you with some of those resources. And finally, the other piece on our Canvas resource page is upcoming trainings. There's a Google Calendar there that you can kind of keep an eye on. And as we start to create more trainings, webinars, and other opportunities, they will be added to that calendar that you can access and register for in the future. In a second, you're going to get a link in the chat to our Google Drive folder. In that folder is directions on how to sign up for our Google Canvas course, as well as some upcoming trainings that we are going to have. One of which is our Y-Vape training. This is a intervention program that your school might be interested in. Another one is our brief intervention trainings. We have 3 this year, one of which has already passed. Our next trainings will be in November and January. These are 2-day trainings, 2 half-day trainings that you can register for free. And this is also another intervention program. If you do not have a vaping or tobacco use prevention or intervention program on your school, this might be something that you are interested in.